and welcome to another of the Fern podcast series. Today I'm with Jeremy Agnew of the Rebuild Gathering. Where are you based currently? In Portugal, is it?
I'm based in Portugal in a national park called Serra da Rábida, which is an hour south of Lisbon. And it's a beautiful biodiverse national park, and I live on top of a hill looking out at the ocean. It's very, very, very pretty.
Sounds interesting. And you did show us the video, and it is absolutely stunning. So what a view you've got. I just want to know more about your experience and how you got to Rebuild.
I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. My first company was a vodka company, and I realized I was kind of killing people softly. And so I realized, I think I probably need a bit of a drastic lifestyle change. And went down the route of, or just expanded my horizons into thinking and seeing how businesses can be impactful. I have worked in tech for good for a long time, multiple different startups. Some failed, some did well, some didn't. So it's been amazing learning curve. But about 5 years ago, my journey, mostly through plant medicine, helped me realize that I needed a greater connection to myself, to others, and to nature. And so through stepping into that pathway, I've now become very engaged with and thinking about the types of living spaces we can create that allow for healthy, happy people, free-range children, and the types of resilient economic and robust systems that we can create that lead to the types of spaces that will last 7 generations down a period of time.
Interesting. And so when did you create Rebuild?
Rebuild, we started about 2.5 years ago. It was an amazing moment, really, actually, during the pandemic. A lot of people were suddenly faced with being stuck in tiny little concrete boxes in urban environments and second guessing whether or not this made sense. A lot of people were thinking, okay, what does it mean to maybe escape the city? And if so, how? And do I have the comforts? Do I have the economic security? Do I have my friends? How do I be in nature and yet have all the things that I cherish? So there was this huge surge of movement of people starting to think differently about their life, and it really challenged us to think outside what was the status quo. It led us to setting up our first online event where we had 700 people from around the world and all came together around thinking about regenerative village building, which is in many ways the evolution of the eco-village, where eco-villages struggled in many different ways around their acceptance of money as not as an evil, but as a form, a tool that we can use to be able to recognize value and reward value and create systems that are robust and resilient. We're stepping into that as well as embracing technology and new technologies that then are building on top of ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom that we now understand is so important in terms of soil health, food security, and regeneration and the repair of our planet. So it's an amalgamation of standing on the shoulder of giants, and then at the same time seeing what is there in the adjacent possible around us that we can bring in. What are the technologies that are there that we can bring in that are tried, tested, proven, that then can start to help us design, build, and live in these types of spaces that we want, that have all the benefits of modernity, yet at the same time we don't have to kind of go backwards in time. We don't have to become agrarian farmers. We can all live with our true purpose, but everybody will have their role to play within this. I think a lot of the fear around eco-villages not only became from the many, many, many failures that were there, because they were really kind of testing out different ways of living and being. What they did manage to do extremely well was the ecological side of things. And so building upon that and then thinking how then we can design spaces that take into consideration all of the different other failure points that eco-villages suffered. So as a result, we created Rebuild and bringing together the world's leaders in thinking about this. And we have 4 pillars that we look at: the purpose, the why, right? Why do we need to be doing this? Why do we need to be thinking about different ways of being? Planet, I mean, it goes without saying, I think I'm preaching to the choir. People, how do we think about self-organizing systems, decentralized systems? How do we have a voice? How do we have a say? How do we respect and honor different people? How do we bring out the best in them? And how do we live together harmoniously? Because many people don't have the technologies or the know-how to step out of an urban environment into for example, rural one, and particularly one which is an intentional community of a large group of people who are all trying to then function together. Obviously, a lot of different things can come to the surface, but that is a part of the healing aspect. So we see the healing of the planet and the healing of people being equally important. And so creating the spaces and the opportunities for people to heal. And that happens in groups, which is wonderful. And then finally, we have prosperity as the fourth pillar. So now we think about economic systems, and that's another part of my work, which is in something called Refi, regenerative finance. This is essentially crypto, blockchain, Web3 for good, for impact for the planet, where we look at ways to align incentives with the protection and the regeneration of nature. And these new systems are allowing us to leverage the financial instruments that are not only there in terms of carbon credits, where we can use that money to be able to fund the regeneration of the land that we want to then, be living in. And so that's just one of the many ways we can use Refi in that sense. But there are also many other accounting practices, etc., and ways of sharing, ways of thinking about economic systems that we can take a great deal of knowledge from the kibbutzim in Israel, for example, where they collectively share all of their resources amongst each other equally. Yet at the same time, that then shows us a lot of weaknesses in the system. It shows us where, for example, if you want to leave, you leave with nothing, right? So this then becomes a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people, because then we go, well, what if I don't feel like I belong? It's a huge commitment to step into a place. So now with that in mind, we start to think about the many myriad of different ways that we can redesign systems to think about how reward can be recognized, reward could be shared amongst each other. And if you leave, you can leave with everything you want, everything that you've created, everything that you have contributed to. And so we're looking at tokenized systems to be able to do that. And they can be, for example, very much micro economies within a village, with a village bank that allows for people to offer, get loans for their startups. Mom and pop company might want to be creating, olive oil from the olive trees that are there on the land and the perennials. So how can we support everybody in their creation of their livelihood? So we're really kind of like pushing the boundaries now on the edges of what's possible. Yet at the same time, we have one foot in the present and what is very possible. So we're using tools and techniques. We're promoting that, we're sharing, and we're learning from others who've been trying this within their spaces to understand what is the potential, what is possible. So it's an enormous like Fab Lab in many ways. These are living labs to be able to learn, to share. And those are the predominant principles of the regenerative aspect of it, is the sharing and the giving, which is interesting because the Refi space has very much adopted that as well. Regenerative finance, obviously, but the openness and the sharing. There's no win or lose. There's no, in order for me to succeed, you have to fail. This is very much about a win-win scenario. So we're reusing, recycling, rebuilding, and taking what we've learned and adapting it and changing it to different environments. Yeah.
Do you think there's a room for development of regenerative finance on personal finance? What I mean by this is a lot of small towns, as you mentioned, if there's a village or someone wants to grow something, there would be a fund or endowment system that would be available to the locals. Do you think that this needs to be, fleshed out more as a business concept?
For sure. What we've seen before that's worked extremely well is cooperatives. So the cooperative format allows for multi-stakeholder ownership, right? And within doing so, we give people skin in the game. All of a sudden, where instead of working for, the company, the boss, etc., where you don't really have an emotional connection to that thing, if you're given the opportunity in a cooperative to co-own, then your impetus and your motivation is a great deal higher, because you have a higher desire in that thing becoming a success, because you're sharing in the wealth. So wealth creation is the key. It's how do we create wealth from the businesses that we generate, and how do those businesses represent all of the multi-stakeholder owners within that space, and how their voice is heard. So within Refi, what we're seeing is DAOs being set up. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. You can think of them in most simple form as like a digitized cooperative. What they allow us to do is to create more nuance. So whereas the cooperative is almost one member, one vote, within a DAO you can have infinite possibilities of how you design a system, so that people can have a voice, and that voice can also be weighted in terms of, let's say, for example, John is an exceptional regenerative agriculture farmer with a background in permaculture, yet I don't have that experience. Why would I have a voice or a say in the governance that is equal to his? So we can adjust these types of decision-making components within the DAO so that John has a higher weighted average to his voice. So there are so many different ways that we can do this. And we could also think about how the distribution of these tokens within the economic system can be passed around to each other. And it's very fractal. So while on the one hand we think of businesses as being very independent in traditional formats, what we're looking at now is how do businesses become interdependent, and how do they can become functioning as a larger system, so that we all see that if I help somebody else's business, it's going to help mine. And this is where we can have what we call aligned incentives. So the aligned incentive aspect of it is in how do we share the wealth and the benefit amongst all of these myriad of different businesses within a village, within a town, within a rural setting. So we start to understand that, like the butterfly wing effect, that every single action and choice we make will have an output, and it will affect somebody else. And therefore, before I make that decision, how does my choice affect others? We bring then that responsibility and accountability back to ourselves.
I mean, one of the issues you have in communities is deprivation. How do you think this rebuild thing will seek to avoid such pitfalls?
Did you say deprivation?
Yeah, rural deprivation. It's, as you know from the UK and stuff like that, the towns and villages may look beautiful on the outset, but there is a certain form of hidden deprivation in rural communities. How do you think this could help to alleviate that?
I think that what we've seen as being the greatest strength of rural communities in the past is their connection to each other, people's relationships, the stories that get passed down through generations. And yet we have had such a massive shift in global economy that much of this went from during the industrial era and then into the technological era, and the huge movement of people into cities. This urbanization is being very beneficial in many, many different ways, but it's also created an enormous vacuum of talent within rural environments, which can lead to the deprivation. The young people who are not there, who don't have that same sense of placemaking and belonging, this is what we can bring back. And if we can do it in a way that provides economic stimulus or opportunity for those people, then there's a reason for people to want to stay in rural communities, and then to listen to their elders and to hear from them, and to create those relationships again that have been so valuable and yet have been lost. So I feel that there's no one quick fix. There's no one thing. There's a multitude of different interventions that need to occur in order for rural spaces to become vibrant, living, beautiful, caring, sharing spaces, particularly as we've seen the degradation of those places as a result of urbanization. It's how do we make them attractive again? How do we give the opportunity for people to want to come back? And I think that's in creating these types of villages, these regenerative villages that give that opportunity.
Okay, so tell me about the village that you're intending to build, because I assume there's an outset designed where you are based at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm involved in a number of different projects. I'm involved in a 500-hectare project in Costa Rica called La Tierra, which is exceptional. It's one of the only, I think, one of 8 beaches in the world that has a waterfall coming down onto the beach. It's quite exceptional. And in that sense, we've been designing a master plan, and we've been thinking about all of the different aspects that are needed in order to make this a thriving, beautiful space for people to want to live, with everything from accessible housing through to high wealth housing. And how do we create diversity? Diversity is key in everything. So the same principles we've been applying to a village here in Portugal called the Traditional Dream Factory, which is on 20 hectares, and that's 2 old chicken farms that were chicken egg factories that we purchased. And we've now got a beautiful, thriving community of more digital nomad, young, vibrant people, and we've now turned that into a DAO, and we've got a legal representation. We've had our token. So it's very cutting edge. That we've had the token sanctioned by the Swiss government, and we're now creating utility tokens for people that buy access rights to that village. So in order to raise the money to do the development for all of the houses and all of the apartments and all of the other facilities that we want to make it really vibrant, we've already begun planting trees and food forests. So we've had amazing events to be able to do that. But and then also at the same time, we're looking at another 500 hectares by the ocean. And that's a gorgeous project, but many of these are in their infancy. There are lots of different projects that have been up and running for quite some time, lots of eco villages that are really well established. And it's rather difficult, I would say, often to retrofit anything because of the resistance to change.
Yeah, this is what I was going to ask you, in fact. I mean, there are some beautiful ideas around the world for rural development, and as you know, in the UK at least, there is a hell of a lot of resistance to change. NIMBYism, as it's termed, is a huge problem across both sides of the Atlantic. How do you face off against such things? Because I'm not aware of the context in Portugal, but I assume there is a level of NIMBYism to alternative forms of architectural development.
There is, but I mean, I would just compartmentalize architectural development as just one of the entire thing. So the big difficulty we face in change is, actually, I love, there's a wonderful quote from Buckminster Fuller, in that it's extremely hard to change the existing reality, right? The easier thing to do is to invent a new reality, and that makes the old one obsolete. I spent a lot of my time in the past trying to think about how we could change and fix the existing system. I realized I was pushing against heavy walls. It was very, very hard. There was a huge amount of resistance with NIMBYism. And so instead I focused all my energy on designing new systems that can catch the old when the old starts to crumble. So if you think about like this kind of existing trajectory that we're on of eternal growth, right, in kind of the capitalism format that we have right now, as that starts to crumble, what is there to catch it? If there is nothing, then we have this sort of Mad Max dystopian nightmare. And as we've seen again and again and again, as governments have enormous disruption, there are usually very kind of abusive figures that step into power afterwards, right? And this can happen on a micro to a micro scale. So what we need to think about is, what is the level playing field that we're creating, these win-win systems that can support people as they start to fall. So rather than trying to change this trajectory, why don't we just build a parallel one? And that's what I'm focusing my attention on. So rather than pushing and fighting and asking people to step in. We have a strong feeling that what if we just build it? What if we live in it? What if we can show people and they can come and they can see and they can experience, they can smell, touch, and they can learn themselves whether or not this is a plausible and possible alternative reality that they can step into. And then you're inviting, right? There's a very different mindset at that point instead of having to push. However, we still do have to then work within the current system. We still have to get planning permission. There are still regulations. There are still many different things. So the way that we approach it is what we call third horizon. This is not my terminology. And I forget who to attribute it to, unfortunately. I think it might be Daniel Schmeichel. No, it's not Daniel Schmeichel. Sorry. Anyway, the idea behind this is a bit of a Trojan horse concept, right? Is instead of pitching people within municipalities, local governments, etc., with the long-term vision of what it is that you're trying to get to, which is often going to be coming up against a lot of people going, oh, well, this sounds like a hippie commune, or it sounds like this, or it sounds like that. They'll have their preconceived notions of what it might be, and then they'll shut it down. If, on the other hand, you don't pitch the third horizon, you pitch a second horizon, something that's much more attainable, but you package it in a way that says, this is going to be creating jobs. This is going to be creating food security. This is going to be creating healthy humans, which is going to reduce the effect of the pressures put upon local hospitals. This is going to be bringing people back from urban environments into rural areas and increasing the amount of capital flow. We're going to be bringing in investors, right, to be able to do this. And we're going to be doing this all with sustainable, regenerative design. We're going to have beautiful buildings, which are going to be low-cost, accessible housing. They're going to be designed in a way that has minimal impact on the land, and we're going to design them in a way that can fit within the building regulations. And so there's always a story that needs to be told in its wholeness. And the second horizon is something that nearly all municipalities can get excited by. They can be like, wow, yeah, you know what? This actually fits in with everything that we're trying to achieve. And yet at the same time, you know where you're going. You know where you need to move to. You know the third horizon you're aiming for. And so this Trojan horse is what we're looking at in terms of how you package up things so that everyone goes, wow, there's a beautiful wooden horse. Let's definitely bring it into our city. Let's bring it into our municipality, and let's welcome that. And within doing so, then, you know, unbeknownst to them, what you're actually trying to do is to create a whole new system, which will hopefully, when you have more and more and more pockets of these that are interconnected and they're working together, you start to have representation because of the enormity of how many people and places are doing this. And then by then, it's too late. We've already begun to create a new system and begun to catch people who want to move from the old and into the new.
Okay, that is interesting. Just have a look at your website here. Can you tell me more about what Rebuild Mastermind is?
Yeah, so in designing the master plans for many of the different spaces, we are ecosystem designers, holistic thinkers. We have a broad spectrum of different experiences, and we help others who want to design a living space, whether it could be a house, which is co-living, or two houses or multiple houses with land. What are the variables? What are the things we have to think of? How do we look at, learn from the land, listen to the land? How do we respect the land? And then how do we think from there? What are our needs as a community? What are the things we're going to bring to it? And then how do we design the master plan with the sequencing involved of the events that need to happen in order us to get to a point where we feel this is wonderful and it's comfortable. We feel happy living here, you know, with our food security, with the energy, with the water, with the perennial food production. Like, many of these different aspects will take a long time. How do we repair our soil? Like, the master planning comes into play when there are so many variables. It's very, very hard for the majority of us to think, shit, this sounds so big, it's too scary. So we're providing these online courses for people to participate in. We do it with the 4 pillars that I mentioned before. We do a day on purpose, we do a day on planet, we do a day on people, and we do a day on prosperity. And this is all leading up to our event in April, where in April we'll have our global summit online, because we've done in-person events as well, all across the world, from Holland to Portugal to Costa Rica, where we've had hundreds and hundreds of people all come together, and we've created programmatic workshops, as well as panel talks, as well as like keynote speakers, etc., and unconference style, so everybody has an opportunity to express their voice and say what they're passionate about and talk about their projects. And we all support each other in the development of these projects. And then the idea behind the mastermind is that those people who want to participate in the mastermind and develop their master plan, it's a master plan light, because also, by the way, the projects that we've done takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort. So this was really just to help people begin to see the formation of what that might be. And they can pitch their project to all of the participants at Rebuild Global, and we're giving away 10% of all ticket sales to the top first prize and the equal second prizes, which will be 2 other village concepts, to help people get it off the ground. Because we really believe in this regenerative aspect of how we can support each other, how we can give, how we can all be responsible for everybody else, and think about how we gift back. And so eventually you want to get to gift economies. And these are, very ancient, traditional ways of doing things. When you get to above the Dunbar number, it becomes quite difficult, of 150 people, because you're holding too many relationships. And so that's when, for example, money comes into play, because we need money as this transactional method to be able to recognize and remember who's done what, right? But when you have a smaller group of people, you can gift. So you can start to be thinking about how I might get some eggs from somebody over here, and I might get some leeks from somebody over there, and in return, I'm providing whatever it is that I'm giving to the world. Let's say I'm an exceptional massage therapist, and so I might be giving lots of massages out to everybody. But we start to begin to find ways that we can create that gift economy over time, but it all relies on trust. So when we're designing the master plan, we start to think about the social dynamics. We start to think about what are the end goals, where do we want to get to, and why. And so we pose a lot of questions to those who are participating to help them start to think about this in their long-term thinking as well as their short-term planning.
That's interesting. Do you have a website people can read more about what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's www.re-build.co.
Brilliant. Jeremy, do you have any words of advice for people looking to develop something similar around the world?
I'd say find your collaborators. This is hard to do it alone, and we all have these beautiful dreams, and the dreams, when they are kept to ourselves, they never happen. When they're shared and we're open about our dreams, we can find other people who share those dreams too. In the Rebuild community, we really want to help people discover each other and to find their collaborators and find their villagers and find their founders and their partners, find their lovers, even find their friends, and find these relationships. So the invitation really is to remember you're not alone. Remember that this is not impossible. Remember there are a lot of other people who are doing this. And remember that you have the knowledge within you, and you have the capacity, you have the passion. So just to reach out to others and to share your ideas. The more and more you do that, the more they can possibly become a reality.
That's a brilliant note to end it on. Jeremy, thank you for joining us today on Ferncast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Take care. Thank you.